My sister, without a job, branded me worthless and my existence pointless since I'm no artist like her. She neglected to remember I finance her whole existence. You know that gut-wrenching feeling when someone you love, someone you've sacrificed everything for, spits in your face and calls you worthless? My own sister did exactly that, and what happened next completely blew up both our lives. I still get chills thinking about it. It all started 3 years ago. My sister, Tara, walked away from her bank job, a good, stable job, to chase her passion for art. She said the 9-to-5 grind was suffocating her soul, that she needed to express herself creatively. And honestly, I threw my full support behind her. Our parents had passed 5 years before, so it was just us, and all I wanted was for her to be happy. I even helped her move into a cheaper apartment, bought her a mountain of art supplies for Christmas. While I was grinding away as a nurse, pulling brutal double shifts on weekends, I told Tara to go for it. Follow her dreams. For the first year, she really did try. She painted every single day, posted her work online, even applied to a few galleries and craft fairs. Nothing sold, not a single piece, but she'd just shrug and say, "Art takes time to monetize, sis." Then came year 2. The painting stopped. She started calling herself a conceptual artist, but her grand concepts never actually turned into anything you could see or touch. Just hours of her explaining these abstract ideas to anyone who'd listen, usually over an expensive coffee I was secretly subsidizing. When her savings finally ran dry, she called me. Could I help with rent? Just for a few months, she promised. She'd figure something out. My heart ached for her, she was family, so I said yes. Those few months turned into a whole damn year. A year of me paying her $700 rent, plus groceries, utilities, you name it. She swore she couldn't get a regular job because it would compromise her artistic integrity. She needed to be free, available for inspiration whenever it struck. Meanwhile, I was picking up extra shifts, working holidays, eating sad sandwiches for dinner, just so I could afford to keep both our lives afloat. She'd text me photos from trendy coffee shops, sketches of ideas that, surprise, never became actual art. The breaking point? Thanksgiving. This past Thanksgiving, I invited Tara to my apartment. Our cousins were there, some friends from work, a full table. I'd worked the night shift before, but I still cooked everything from scratch. Turkey, stuffing, 3 kinds of pie, the whole feast. Tara showed up 2 hours late, empty-handed, not even a bottle of wine. And the first words out of her mouth? A complaint that I'd made regular stuffing instead of the cornbread kind she preferred. My jaw nearly hit the floor. Later, during dinner, my friend Jackie, bless her heart, asked Tara about her latest art project. Tara launched into her usual speech about exploring the intersection of existence and emptiness. Jackie, ever so polite, asked if she had any pieces to show. Tara scoffed, "Physical art is limiting. My work exists in theoretical space." Our cousin Brian, seeing my face, tried to change the subject. He asked me about my recent promotion to charge nurse. I'd been training for 6 months and just landed the position the week before. Before I could even answer, Tara cut me off. Cold. Typical, she sneered, that you define yourself by some corporate title. You're just another cog in the capitalist machine. The air just froze. Did she really just say that? At least I'm trying to create something meaningful, she continued, instead of being useless to society, like you. The whole table went silent. My blood ran cold. I couldn't believe my ears. Repeat that, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She doubled down. Anyone can be a nurse. It just requires following basic instructions. Art requires actual talent and vision. You gave up on real dreams and settled for mediocrity. She called me useless 3 more times, explaining how I'd never contribute anything lasting to the world. My friend Rachel, a literal angel, tried to defend me, mentioning the lives I'd saved, the families I'd helped through their worst moments. Tara just waved her off. That's just doing a job anyone could do with basic training. I feel sorry for you. You'll never understand what it means to have a calling. That's when Brian lost it. You've got some nerve calling anyone useless, he boomed, when you haven't worked in 3 years. Tara, surprisingly, stood her ground. Employment doesn't determine someone's value. Oh, really? Brian shot back. Then who's paying your rent, Tara? For the first time all night, Tara went quiet. Every single eye at that table was on her. She mumbled something about support from various sources. Brian looked at me, a question in his eyes. I just nodded. The table absolutely exploded. Jackie was furious. Why are you supporting someone who just called you useless? Rachel declared Tara was a parasite. Our other cousin, Diana, added that she'd always wondered how Tara afforded her lifestyle without working. Tara tried to slink away, but Brian blocked her path. You need to apologize, he said, his voice firm to her. In front of everyone. Tara's response sealed her fate. I won't apologize for speaking the truth about her meaningless existence. That was it. That was all I needed to hear. The next morning, with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, I called Tara's landlord. I gave notice that I would no longer be paying her rent. My name had been the only one on those checks for over a year. I also canceled the credit card I'd given her for emergencies, the one she used for artisanal coffee and imaginary art supplies. I stopped the automatic transfer for her utilities. Then I texted Tara, since I'm so useless, my money must be useless too. My phone rang immediately. It was her, screaming, you can't just cut me off without warning. I'm reminding you, I said, my voice steady, that you called me useless to my face, in front of my friends and family. That has nothing to do with rent, she shrieked. It has everything to do with it, I replied. You have 30 days to figure something out. And I hung up. The second week, she tried calling our cousins for money. Brian had already spread the word about Thanksgiving, so no one would help her. Week 3, she actually applied for jobs, but her resume hadn't been updated in 3 years, and she had no references. Week 4, she begged me to reconsider. Said she didn't mean it, that she was just stressed about her art. I asked her to show me one piece she'd completed in the past year. Silence. She couldn't. On day 31, she was evicted. She had to move in with our aunt, who lives 4 hours away in a small town with no fancy coffee shops or art scene. My aunt, bless her practical heart, made Tara pay rent by working at her dog grooming business. Tara, the conceptual artist, was now washing dogs for 10 hours a day. Actual, useful work. She actually posted once on social media about how the universe was teaching her humility through this journey. Brian, ever the legend, commented, it wasn't the universe, Tara. It was consequences. Last I heard, she was saving up to move back to the city. At minimum wage, that'll take about as long as she spent calling me useless while I paid for her entire life. Just 3 days after I cut her off, my phone buzzed 4 times in a row while I was eating breakfast. It was Brian, texting me screenshots. Tara had posted this long, dramatic thing about toxic family members who don't support artists and how society punishes creative people for not fitting into capitalist boxes. She wrote about being abandoned by her only sister during her most vulnerable time and how our whole family turned their backs on her because they couldn't understand her vision. The comments were flooded with strangers telling her she deserved better, that real family would never do this. My blood pressure spiked. I felt a white-hot rage, reading her twisted version of events where she was the victim and I was some corporate villain crushing her dreams. Of course, she didn't mention I'd paid her rent for a year, or that she'd called me useless to my face in front of everyone. 20 minutes later, Rachel called. She'd seen Tara's posts too, and half our mutual friends had sent her screenshots asking what really happened. I told Rachel I couldn't believe Tara was lying to strangers on the internet. Rachel, being Rachel, calmly told me, anyone who actually knows us will see through it. Don't waste energy defending yourself to people who don't matter. She reminded me that our real friends and family saw what happened at Thanksgiving, and they knew the truth. I thanked her, feeling a little better, but still seething that Tara was out there making me look like the bad guy. I decided to focus on work instead of obsessing over social media drama I couldn't control. My first shift after cutting Tara off was actually one of my best in months. I wasn't constantly checking my phone for her emergency texts or worrying about whether she had enough money for groceries. I threw myself into my new charge nurse responsibilities and handled a truly chaotic shift where we had 3 trauma cases come in at once. My supervisor, Finn Bradshaw, pulled me aside afterward. He said I seemed more focused and energized than I'd been in months, that I did great managing the team during the chaos, and he was glad he'd promoted me. I felt a surge of pride, a quiet satisfaction. For the first time in years, I could actually concentrate on my job without half my brain worrying about Tara's latest crisis. Week 2 of Tara being cut off, my phone started blowing up around 9 a.m. I was at the hospital, getting ready for my shift, when the texts started pouring in, one after another. She said the landlord had posted an eviction notice. She was freaking out. She had nowhere to go. She begged me to pay just 1 more month so she could figure things out and find a job. She sent photos of the notice, claimed she'd applied to 3 places already, but no one had called her back. She promised this was the last time she'd ask for help. After this month, she'd handle everything herself. I read all 15 messages. I didn't respond to a single one. Instead, during my lunch break, I opened my banking app. I looked at my credit card balance, which had been sitting stubbornly at $4,000 for the past year. All that debt came from supporting Tara when my paychecks weren't enough to cover both our lives. I transferred $700 from my checking account straight to the credit card. Watching that balance drop, it felt incredible. Seeing that number finally go down instead of up, for once. I used the money I would have sent Tara for her rent and put it towards my own debt that existed because of her. That evening, Diana called while I was driving home. Tara had contacted her, asking for a $2,000 loan to cover rent and deposits on a new place. Diana told her no, and suggested she try getting a job like normal people do when they need money. Tara hung up on her, crying. Diana just wanted to make sure I knew Tara was going around to everyone, begging for cash. I thanked her for the heads up and said I was glad she didn't give in. Diana scoffed. Tara has some nerve asking family for thousands after what she said to you at Thanksgiving. My aunt called me the next day, which was a surprise. We hadn't talked directly in months. She said Brian had told her everything about Thanksgiving and Tara's situation. My aunt offered to let Tara stay with her temporarily if Tara agreed to work at her dog grooming business and pay rent like a normal tenant. It was in a small town, 4 hours away, with no art scene or fancy coffee shops. I thanked my aunt, but told her this was Tara's problem to solve now, and I wasn't going to fix it for her anymore. My aunt said she understood completely and was proud of me for standing up for myself. She added that she was making the offer anyway because she remembered how hard it was when our parents died 5 years ago, and she didn't want Tara ending up homeless. I appreciated that, but firmly said Tara made her choices, and now she had to deal with what came next. 2 days before Tara's eviction date, my aunt texted me. Tara finally accepted her offer after running out of other options. That same day, Tara posted this dramatic farewell to the city on social media, with photos of her apartment and her favorite coffee shop. She wrote about being forced into exile, away from her artistic community, and how her art would survive this persecution even if she had to create in the middle of nowhere. She made it sound like she was some revolutionary banished by an oppressive regime, instead of someone who refused to work and ran out of money. Jackie sent me a screenshot of the post with 3 laughing emojis and a message saying, "Tara is unbelievable." We met for coffee the next morning before my shift. Jackie just kept shaking her head at Tara's dramatics. She told me I looked happier and way less tired than I had in years. Jackie said she was proud of me for finally standing up for myself instead of letting Tara walk all over me forever. I admitted it felt good not having to worry about Tara's rent and emergencies every single day. Jackie raised her coffee cup. Here's to useless nurses who actually contribute to society by saving lives and paying their own bills. The next week, my paycheck hit my account, and I stared at the number on my phone screen for a full minute. $700 more than usual sat there because I wasn't sending it to Tara's landlord anymore. I opened a new savings account that same day and transferred the full $700 into it. Watching that balance appear in my savings felt better than any thank you Tara had never given me in 3 years. My aunt texted me 2 days later with an update about Tara's first day at the dog grooming business. Tara showed up 2 hours late and tried explaining that artists don't function on regular schedules. My aunt, pragmatic as ever, told her she could function on a regular schedule or function without a place to live. Tara showed up on time the next day. Brian called the following weekend and invited me to dinner at his place with Diana and some other family members. I drove over Sunday evening, and everyone was relaxed and friendly. We ate pasta, talked about work and normal family stuff. Nobody mentioned Tara until we were clearing dishes. Diana said she heard Tara lasted exactly 3 days before complaining that washing dogs was beneath her. Brian laughed, adding that our aunt apparently told Tara that being homeless would also be beneath her, so she better choose which one she preferred. I went home that night feeling lighter than I had in months. Against my better judgment, I checked Tara's social media the next morning before my shift. She'd posted photos of herself covered in dog hair, with long captions about how manual labor was destroying her creative spirit. The comments were brutal. Most people told her to grow up. Someone wrote, maybe her creative spirit needed destroying if it couldn't survive an honest day's work. Another person said they'd been following her art journey for years, and this was the first time she'd actually contributed anything useful to society. I closed the app and got ready for work. Finn, my supervisor, called me 3 days later while I was grocery shopping. He said Tara was actually doing okay, despite her constant complaints. She showed up on time now after my aunt threatened to kick her out. She was learning the work, even though she acted like every task was torture. Finn said he thought she might actually stick with it because she had no other options left. I thanked him for the update and finished my shopping without the usual anxiety about my bank account. I picked up an extra shift at the hospital the following week and used the overtime pay to book a vacation for myself. Just a long weekend at a beach resort 3 hours away, but it was the first vacation I'd taken in 4 years. I'd always been saving money for Tara's emergencies that were never actually emergencies. Rachel and Jackie insisted on taking me out to celebrate my upcoming vacation. We went to a nice Italian restaurant that I would never have been able to afford before. I ordered an expensive entree without checking the price first and didn't feel guilty about spending money on myself for once. Jackie raised her wine glass and said, "You deserve this," after years of supporting someone who never appreciated it. My phone buzzed at 2 in the morning, 3 days before my vacation. Tara had sent me a long text message. She said she'd been thinking about what she said at Thanksgiving, and she realized now how hurtful it was. She wanted to explain that she was just scared about her future and took it out on me. She said she was sorry and hoped I could understand where she was coming from. I read the message 3 times, then set my phone down without responding. Jackie had told me that apologizing only after facing consequences isn't the same as being genuinely sorry. I thought she was right about that. My aunt called the next week to update me. Tara had been working for a month now and actually seemed to be settling in. She was making friends with the other groomer and had stopped complaining about the early morning schedule. My aunt said Tara even volunteered to work extra hours last weekend. I thanked my aunt for letting me know and told her I appreciated everything she was doing for Tara. After we hung up, I looked at my savings account balance again. Almost $1,500 saved in just over a month. I was building something for myself instead of pouring money into Tara's refusal to work. The resort was 3 hours down the coast, and I checked in on a Friday afternoon. I spent the first day on the beach with a paperback I'd been meaning to read for months, letting the sun warm my shoulders while waves crashed a few feet away. Nobody knew where I was except Rachel, and she'd promised not to tell anyone. I swam in the ocean, ate dinner at the hotel restaurant without checking the prices, and fell asleep before 9 without setting an alarm. Saturday morning, I woke up naturally at 8. I realized I hadn't slept past 7 in years because I was always worried about missing a call from Tara. I spent the whole day reading, swimming, and ordering drinks with umbrellas in them. Sunday, I walked along the beach and watched families building sand castles and couples taking photos. Something loosened in my chest that had been tight since our parents died. I'd been carrying Tara's weight for so long that I forgot what it felt like to just exist without worrying about someone else's next crisis. When I drove home Monday evening, I felt lighter than I had in 5 years. My mailbox was stuffed with junk mail and bills. When I got back to my apartment, I sorted through everything while standing in the hallway and almost threw away a plain white envelope with my name handwritten on the front. I opened it, and a $50 bill fell out onto the floor. The note inside was short, written in Tara's messy handwriting. She said this was her first rent payment to our aunt, and she wanted me to see that she was actually working and earning money now. She didn't ask for anything or make excuses. Just stated the facts and signed her name. I stood there, holding the money and the note, for a long time. Part of me wanted to believe she was changing, but another part remembered all the times she'd promised to get her life together before. I pulled out my phone and texted my aunt, asking if Tara was really working or if this was some kind of performance. My aunt replied 20 minutes later, saying Tara had been showing up on time every day for 6 weeks and seemed genuinely committed to the job. She said Tara still complained sometimes, but she was doing the work without trying to quit. I put the $50 in my wallet and the note in my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to call Tara or text her back, but I kept the money instead of throwing it away. 2 weeks later, Brian texted our family group chat about a Super Bowl party at his place. He listed everyone who was invited, and Tara's name wasn't on the list. I felt a small twist of guilt about that until Diana called me the next day. She said Tara had created this whole situation herself, and we weren't obligated to pretend everything was fine just because some time had passed. She reminded me that Tara had called me useless in front of everyone and never really apologized for it. Diana said family wasn't just about blood. It was about how people treated each other. I went to Brian's party on Sunday, and the place was packed with cousins and friends. Everyone asked how I was doing, and several people mentioned I looked healthier and less tired than the last time they'd seen me. Jackie hugged me and said I had color in my face again. Rachel brought up my vacation and asked if I'd had fun. Nobody mentioned Tara for the first 2 hours until I brought her up myself. I told Brian about the card with the money and asked if he thought I should respond. He said that was up to me, but he wasn't ready to forgive her yet. Diana said Tara needed to prove she'd changed through consistent actions over time, not just one gesture. Everyone was careful not to make me feel bad about my decision to cut her off. They seemed more concerned about protecting me than repairing things with Tara. The following Tuesday at work, Finn stopped me in the hallway outside the nurse's station. He said he'd noticed I'd really stepped up since becoming charge nurse, and he wanted to talk to me about a nursing supervisor position that was opening up. The job would mean more responsibility and significantly better pay. I'd be overseeing 3 floors instead of 1, managing a larger team. Finn said he thought I was ready for it and wanted me to apply. I told him I'd think about it, and he said the application deadline was Friday. I filled out the application that night at my kitchen table. While I was writing about my experience and qualifications, I realized I probably would have turned this down 6 months ago. The supervisor position had demanding hours and required being on call for emergencies. Back when Tara was constantly texting me about rent money or utility shutoffs or some new crisis, I couldn't have handled the extra responsibility. Now, I could actually focus on my own career without worrying about dropping everything to deal with her problems. I submitted the application on Thursday morning. That same week, I saw Tara had posted something new on social media. She'd shared a sketch she'd done of the dog grooming shop where she worked. The drawing showed the front counter with clippers and shampoo bottles and a small dog sitting in a grooming tub. It was actually pretty good, way better than the conceptual nonsense she used to post about theoretical space and existence. The caption said working with dogs had inspired some new art ideas and she was trying to capture real life instead of abstract concepts. Several people commented, saying they liked it and asking if she was selling prints. My aunt called me on Saturday morning while I was doing laundry. She said Tara had asked if she could use the garage as a small studio space in the evenings. My aunt had agreed as long as Tara kept up with her work responsibilities. Apparently, Tara had been painting after her shifts ended instead of going out or watching TV. My aunt said she'd checked on her a few times, and Tara seemed genuinely focused on her art in a way she hadn't been in years. I thanked my aunt for the update and told her I appreciated everything she was doing for Tara. After we hung up, I thought about how Tara had always said she needed to be free from work to create art. But now that she had a regular job, she was actually making things again. Maybe she needed structure instead of endless free time. Finn called me into his office 3 weeks after I'd applied for the supervisor position. He said the hospital had reviewed all the applications and they wanted to offer me the job. It came with a 20% raise and better benefits. I'd start in the new role at the beginning of next month. I accepted immediately and shook his hand. When I left his office, I texted Rachel and Jackie, asking if they wanted to celebrate that night. We met at the same restaurant where we'd celebrated my vacation, and I ordered an expensive entree and dessert without checking prices. When the check came, I grabbed it before either of them could reach for it. I told them this was my treat, and for the first time in years, I could afford to pick up the entire bill without worrying about my bank account. 3 months passed. I was working my second week in the supervisor role when my phone buzzed during my lunch break. Tara's name appeared on the screen with a message asking if we could talk on the phone sometime. I stared at the text for a full minute before responding that I'd call her after my shift ended. The rest of the day dragged as I kept thinking about what she might want to say. When I finally got home and dialed her number, she answered on the first ring. Her voice was different, softer, smaller. It shook me. She asked how I was doing, and I told her about the promotion. She said that was great and she was happy for me, and the words didn't have that fake quality they used to have when she'd pretend to care about my work. We talked about nothing important for a few minutes before she took a deep breath and said she needed to apologize. She told me she'd been thinking about Thanksgiving every single day since it happened. Working at the grooming business had shown her how hard it was to earn money. How exhausting it felt to work 10-hour shifts and come home too tired to do anything else. She said she finally understood what I'd been doing for her all those years while she sat in coffee shops pretending to be an artist. She used the word ashamed 3 times. She said she was ashamed of how she treated me. Ashamed of calling me useless when I was the only reason she had a roof over her head. Ashamed that it took losing everything to make her grow up. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I told her I appreciated the apology. She asked if we could go back to how things were before. I said no immediately. The silence on her end lasted long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then, she surprised me by saying she didn't actually want that either. She said she needed to prove to herself that she could take care of her own life before we could have a real relationship as sisters. She asked if we could maybe talk once a week on the phone, and I agreed to that. We hung up after 20 minutes, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. 2 weeks later, my aunt called while I was grocery shopping. She said Tara had been promoted to assistant manager at the grooming business. Hugo, the owner, had been skeptical about giving her more responsibility, but Tara had shown up on time every single day for 3 months, never called in sick, and customers specifically asked for her because she was good with nervous dogs. The promotion came with a $150 raise, and Tara had cried when they told her. My aunt said she'd never seen someone so happy about making $12 an hour. I thanked her for the update and finished my shopping, adding items to my cart without checking prices like I used to do. That weekend, I was scrolling through social media and saw that Tara had posted photos from a local art fair in my aunt's town. She'd sold 3 paintings, small ones of the dogs she worked with. The captions talked about how it wasn't much money, but it felt amazing to actually sell her work instead of just talking about theoretical concepts. The comments were from real people saying they loved the paintings, not the usual empty praise from people who felt obligated to support her. I liked the post without commenting. Brian texted me a month later, saying he'd driven through my aunt's town for work and stopped by the grooming shop. He said Tara looked healthy and happy, that she'd shown him around the place and introduced him to the other groomer, and didn't complain once about her job or the town or anything. She'd asked about me, and he told her I was doing well. He said it was weird seeing her act like a normal person instead of a victim. I told him I was glad she was doing better and left it at that. The next day, I called a therapist whose number my supervisor Finn had given me months ago when I mentioned feeling stressed about family stuff. I made an appointment for the following week and showed up nervous but determined. The therapist helped me work through my feelings about supporting Tara and where the line was between helping family and enabling bad behavior. She said what I did for Tara came from love, but it had hurt both of us in the end. Tara never learned to take care of herself, and I never learned that it was okay to put my own needs first. We scheduled weekly sessions, and I left feeling like maybe I could figure out how to have healthy relationships instead of just giving people whatever they wanted. For months after Thanksgiving, Tara texted me photos of an apartment. It was tiny, barely bigger than my bedroom, and she was sharing it with a roommate who worked at the same grooming business, but the rent was split between them, and Tara was paying her half with money she earned herself. She sent another text saying she knew it wasn't much, but it felt good to have her own place again. I congratulated her, and I genuinely meant it. I checked my savings account that same day and saw the balance had grown to $3,200. Every paycheck, I'd been putting away the money that used to go to Tara's rent and expenses. For the first time in my adult life, I had an emergency fund that could actually handle an emergency. It felt more secure than anything I'd ever done for Tara, knowing that if something went wrong, I could take care of myself without going into debt. The following week, Tara texted, asking if I'd be willing to meet for coffee when she visited the city next month. She was coming back to see some friends and wanted to show me her new paintings in person. I read the message 3 times before responding. Part of me wanted to say no, to keep the distance we'd built and protect myself from getting pulled back into old patterns. But another part of me missed my sister, the real version of her that I'd seen glimpses of before she quit her job and started playing artist. I typed yes and hit send before I could change my mind. Rachel called me the next day, and I told her about agreeing to meet Tara for coffee. She went quiet for a few seconds, then asked if I was sure that was a good idea. I said I wasn't sure about anything, but I missed my sister and wanted to see if she'd actually changed. Rachel told me to be careful about letting Tara back in too quickly, because people who hurt you once can do it again if you don't protect yourself. I appreciated her concern, but I explained that I wasn't planning to support Tara financially again or go back to how things were before. I just wanted to see her and talk to her like normal siblings do. Rachel said she understood and she'd support whatever I decided, but she made me promise to call her right after the coffee meeting so she could check on me. I promised and felt grateful to have friends who actually cared about my well-being instead of just taking from me. The day of the coffee meeting arrived faster than I expected. I got to the shop 15 minutes early and sat at a corner table where I could see the door. My hands were shaking a little as I waited, and I kept checking my phone to see if Tara would cancel. She walked in exactly on time, and I almost didn't recognize her at first. She looked different in a way I couldn't quite pin down right away. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of the messy artistic style she used to wear. Her clothes were clean and practical instead of the thrift store vintage pieces she used to claim were part of her aesthetic. But the biggest difference was in her face. She looked healthier somehow, less stressed and more grounded than I'd seen her in years. She spotted me and waved, and I waved back, feeling my stomach flip with nervousness. She sat down across from me and thanked me for coming, and I nodded and said I was glad she made it. We ordered coffee, and neither of us knew what to say for the first few minutes. Then Tara pulled out her phone and asked if she could show me some photos. I said yes, and she scrolled through pictures of her paintings. They were actually good. Not the pretentious conceptual stuff she used to talk about, but real paintings of dogs and the grooming shop and landscapes around my aunt's town. I told her they were beautiful and meant it. She smiled and looked genuinely happy about the compliment instead of acting like praise was something she deserved just for existing. She started talking about her work at the grooming shop, and I waited for the usual complaints about how the job was beneath her or killing her creativity. They never came. She just talked about learning to groom different breeds and how satisfying it felt to see a dog go from matted and dirty to clean and happy. She mentioned her coworkers and how they'd been teaching her things and including her in their lunch breaks. It was the first time in 3 years I'd heard her talk about other people without making everything about herself. About halfway through our coffee, Tara stopped talking and looked down at her cup. She said she needed to thank me for cutting her off. I wasn't expecting that, and I didn't know how to respond. She kept going, explaining that she was angry at first, furious actually, and she spent weeks thinking I was the worst person in the world. But then she had to actually work and pay her own bills and take care of herself for the first time since quitting the bank. She said it was hard at first, really hard, and she cried herself to sleep some nights because her hands hurt from washing dogs all day, and she was so tired she could barely move. But then something changed. She started feeling proud of herself when she got her first paycheck that she'd earned completely on her own. She felt accomplished when her boss complimented her work. She felt capable when she figured out how to budget her money so she could afford rent and food and still have a little left over. She said she was actually proud of herself for the first time in years. And she realized she'd never felt that way when I was paying for everything because she hadn't earned any of it. I listened to all of this and felt emotions I couldn't quite sort out. Part of me was happy that Tara had learned something and was doing better. Part of me was still angry about Thanksgiving and all the years I'd worked myself to exhaustion while she did nothing. But I told her I was proud of her too. And I could see she was really trying and making progress, but I also said I was still hurt by what she'd said at Thanksgiving. And I didn't know if I'd ever forget hearing her call me useless in front of everyone I cared about. Tara nodded, and her eyes got watery, but she didn't cry. She said she understood completely, and she wasn't asking me to forget it or pretend it didn't happen. She said what she said was horrible and wrong, and she'd been thinking about it every single day since then. She knew she couldn't take it back, but she wanted me to know she didn't believe any of it anymore. She said watching dogs get groomed taught her that useful work was any work that helped someone or something, and nursing was 1,000,000 times more useful than anything she'd ever done with her so-called art career. We finished our coffee, and both felt like we'd said what we needed to say. Before we left, Tara suggested maybe we could talk on the phone once a week and see how that went. She said she didn't want to push for too much too fast because she knew she needed to earn back my trust slowly. I agreed that weekly phone calls sounded manageable and safe for both of us. We hugged goodbye, and it felt different from our old hugs, less automatic and more genuine. I walked to my car and called Rachel like I'd promised. I told her the meeting went well and Tara seemed like she was actually changing. Rachel said she was glad but reminded me to keep my boundaries firm and not let my guard down too fast. I agreed and drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. 2 days later, my aunt called. She said she'd been talking to Tara and heard about our coffee meeting. She told me she was really impressed with how both Tara and I had handled this whole situation. I thanked her and said I was just trying to figure out what healthy family relationships were supposed to look like. My aunt said that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family is let them face their own consequences instead of protecting them from reality. She said she'd seen too many parents and siblings ruin people by always bailing them out and never letting them learn to stand on their own. I told her I appreciated her taking Tara in and giving her structure when I couldn't do it anymore. She said Tara was actually one of her best workers now, and she was glad to have her. The next weekend, I decided to use some of my savings to redecorate my apartment. I'd been living with the same cheap furniture I'd bought years ago when I was trying to save money to help Tara. I went to a real furniture store instead of the thrift shops I usually haunted and bought a new couch that was comfortable and looked nice. And I got a real bed frame instead of just a mattress on the floor. I bought curtains that matched and artwork for my walls that I actually liked instead of Tara's failed paintings that I'd hung up to make her feel supported. It took me a whole day to rearrange everything and get rid of the old stuff. But when I finished, my apartment felt like mine for the first time. It felt like a space for an adult who had her life together, instead of someone just surviving while supporting someone else. Tara and I had our first weekly phone call on a Tuesday evening. I was nervous about it, but I answered when she called, and we talked for about 30 minutes. We discussed her work, and she told me about a difficult dog she'd groomed that week. I told her about my new supervisor role and the extra responsibilities I was handling. She asked questions about my job that showed she was actually listening instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. We talked about some paintings she was working on, and she sent me photos after we hung up. It felt like talking to my sister instead of managing a dependent adult who couldn't take care of herself. I felt good after the call ended, and I marked the next Tuesday on my calendar for our next one. 6 months after Thanksgiving, Brian called to invite me to a family barbecue at his place. He mentioned he'd invited Tara, too, and wanted to make sure I was okay with that before I committed to coming. I felt nervous about seeing Tara in a family setting again after what happened last time, but I decided to go and see how it felt. I told Brian I'd be there and asked what I could bring. He said just to bring myself and not to worry about anything. The day of the barbecue arrived, and I drove to Brian's house with my stomach in knots. I got there early and helped Brian set up tables in his backyard. Diana arrived next with her husband and kids. Jackie came too, since she'd become friends with our whole family after the Thanksgiving disaster. Tara showed up right on time, carrying a wrapped package. She greeted everyone politely and gave Brian the package. He opened it and pulled out a painting of his house that Tara had done from a photo on his social media. It was really good, and Brian seemed genuinely touched by the gift. Tara didn't ask anyone for money or favors or help with anything. She brought her own drinks and offered to help with the grilling. I watched our cousins relax around her as the afternoon went on. Diana actually laughed at something Tara said about a difficult customer at the grooming shop. Brian asked her about her art, and she showed him photos on her phone without any of the pretentious explanations she used to give. She talked about her paintings like they were a hobby she enjoyed, instead of some grand artistic calling that made her better than everyone else. I sat in a lawn chair with my beer and watched my sister interact with our family like a normal person and felt something shift inside me that I couldn't quite name yet. Diana walked over to where I was sitting and asked if she could talk to me for a minute. We moved away from the grill to a quieter corner of the yard near Brian's fence. She put her hand on my arm and told me she was really glad I'd stuck to my boundaries with Tara because it clearly worked. She said Tara seemed like a completely different person now, not the entitled artist who'd shown up to Thanksgiving. Diana said she thought we might actually get our real sister back, the one who existed before she quit her job and decided regular work was beneath her. I nodded and told Diana I was starting to see that too, but I was still being careful about trusting it. We walked back to the group, and I grabbed another beer from the cooler. About an hour later, Tara came over and asked if we could talk privately for a few minutes. My stomach tightened, but I said, sure. We walked to the front yard where it was quiet. Tara looked nervous and kept pulling at the hem of her shirt. She told me she'd been saving money to pay me back for some of what I'd spent supporting her over those years. I started to say that wasn't necessary, but she cut me off. She said she wanted to do it, that she needed to do it for herself. She explained she'd been setting aside $50 from each paycheck, and she had almost $500 saved up. She asked if I would accept it when she had enough. I felt something catch in my throat and told her that if it was important to her, then yes, I would accept it. She smiled for the first time that day, a real smile that reached her eyes. We went back to the barbecue and stayed for another 2 hours. The next month passed quickly, with work keeping me busy. Then one Saturday morning, I checked my mailbox and found an envelope from Tara. Inside was a check for $500 and a note written on plain paper. The note said this was the first payment, and she'd keep sending more until she'd paid back what she could remember me spending. I sat on my couch, holding the check and the note, and felt tears in my eyes. I hadn't expected her to actually follow through. I deposited the check into my savings account that afternoon, and it felt different from any other deposit I'd made. The following Tuesday, I had my regular therapy session. I told my therapist about the check and about seeing Tara at the barbecue. My therapist helped me work through the fact that Tara was actually changing and following through on her promises. She reminded me that I could trust Tara slowly while still maintaining the boundaries that protected my own well-being. I didn't have to choose between having a sister and protecting myself. I could do both if I stayed aware and didn't fall back into old patterns. That conversation helped me feel less guilty about still being cautious around Tara, even though she was clearly trying. 3 weeks after that therapy session, my phone rang while I was making dinner. It was Tara calling. She sounded excited and talked fast. She told me she'd been accepted to show her work at a small gallery in my aunt's town. The gallery owner had seen her paintings at a local craft fair and asked if she wanted wall space for a month. Tara asked if I might come to the opening. I felt nervous about committing, but I heard myself saying I'd love to come. She gave me the date and time and thanked me about 5 times before we hung up. The gallery opening was on a Friday evening 2 weeks later. I left work early and drove the 4 hours to my aunt's town. The gallery was small, just one room in an old building downtown, but it was clean and well lit. Tara's paintings covered one entire wall. I walked slowly along the wall, looking at each piece. The paintings were beautiful and real, actual landscapes and still life studies, not the pretentious conceptual stuff she used to talk about. She'd painted the grooming shop, the street where my aunt lived, a sunset over the small park in town. The work was good, genuinely good, and I felt proud of her. Other people filled the gallery, looking at all the artist's work. I watched 3 different people put red sold stickers on Tara's paintings. She was standing across the room talking to someone, and when she saw me, she waved. A few minutes later, she came over with 2 people. She introduced them as friends from the grooming shop and then introduced me as her sister, who had supported her through some tough times. She didn't mention the fight or me cutting her off or any of the bad parts. She just expressed real gratitude for my past help and moved on to talking about the paintings. Her friends were nice and normal and seemed to genuinely like Tara. After they walked away, my aunt appeared next to me. She pulled me aside near the gallery entrance and told me she was proud of both of us. She said Tara had become one of her best employees at the grooming business and a good tenant who paid rent on time. She said she thought our relationship was healthier now than it had been in years, maybe healthier than it had ever been. I hugged my aunt and thanked her for giving Tara a place to land when I couldn't do it anymore. The gallery opening ended around 9 o'clock. Tara asked if I wanted to grab dinner, and I said yes. We went to a small restaurant 2 blocks away and got a table in the back. For the first time in years, we talked honestly about everything. We talked about the past 3 years and how we'd both made mistakes. I told her I should have set boundaries earlier instead of letting resentment build up. She said she'd been scared to work because she thought getting a regular job meant giving up on her dreams forever. We agreed that what happened at Thanksgiving was awful and painful, but probably necessary. Neither of us would have changed without it. After we'd talked through most of dinner, I looked at her across the table and told her I forgave her for what she'd said that night. She got quiet and then told me she forgave herself for wasting 3 years being too scared to work. We both started crying a little, but it felt like relief instead of sadness. We paid the check and walked back to the gallery to get our cars. I drove back to the city that night, feeling lighter than I had in months. 8 months passed, and everything changed between us. Tara and I talked every Sunday night, real conversations where we both shared what was happening in our lives without drama or resentment. She told me about the dogs she groomed and the paintings she worked on after her shifts. And I told her about my patients and the new procedures I was learning as a supervisor. Once a month, I drove to visit her, or she came back to the city to see me. We'd get coffee or walk through parks or just sit in my apartment watching movies like we used to before everything fell apart. The difference now was that neither of us needed anything from the other except company. She paid her own bills, and I kept my own money, and we were finally just sisters again instead of me being her bank account. My aunt told me Tara had become her most reliable employee and was training new groomers on the weekends for extra pay. Brian mentioned he'd seen her at a family barbecue, and she seemed genuinely happy instead of performing happiness while secretly miserable. One Tuesday afternoon, a package arrived at my apartment with Tara's return address on it. Inside was a canvas wrapped in brown paper and a note saying she'd painted something for me. I unwrapped it carefully and found a portrait of 2 women standing back to back, both facing forward with their arms crossed and strong expressions on their faces. One wore scrubs, and the other had paint stains on her shirt. The resemblance to us was clear, but not exact. More like an impression of who we'd become than who we looked like. At midnight, I hung it in my living room above the couch, where I could see it every time I walked in the door. Work kept getting better as I settled into my supervisor role. My savings account hit $5,000, and I started looking at buying a small condo instead of renting forever. I picked up hobbies I'd abandoned years ago because I was too tired from working extra shifts to afford Tara's life. Rachel and Jackie noticed I smiled more and stopped apologizing for things that weren't my fault. Tara posted photos of her paintings selling at local galleries and art fairs. Actual sales with actual money that she earned from work she created. She moved into a better apartment with a roommate who also worked at the grooming business. My aunt said Tara talked about maybe going back to school part-time to study business so she could eventually open her own grooming shop with an art studio attached. We were both building lives we could be proud of, lives we paid for ourselves, lives that felt real and solid instead of fake and fragile. Our relationship worked now because we both took care of ourselves first instead of me taking care of both of us while she took care of, well, nothing. What do you think? Where do you draw the line between helping someone you love and letting them drown both of you in the process? Have you ever had to make a tough choice like this with family? I really want to hear your stories in the comments.